Thanks, Punita, for joining right on time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh, and maybe we'll wait for 5 minutes beyond 3. I'm not sure because being a holiday post lunch, I don't know how many. Yeah, at least about 70 odd students have registered, but I don't know how many will join. Hai
I see some senior ones also. Akash.
na? Not 70. Actually, PhD students won't join from today onwards. They have a separate, so it's only clinical batches. Some are repeaters from 18 and 19 because they had not completed their assignments or whatever reasons they have to repeat. So there are some students from 18 and 19 batches also, not just 2020.
Okay. So, let me see.
2020 are only MD students. Rest all are DMMCH students are from last year or the year before that.
Okay.
Because the new batch hasn't joined, Apina.
So how many do we expect? Like we are at the moment 20 of us participants. So maybe another 5, 7, then we start off or what?
I think we should maybe by 5 past 3 maximum we should, because
Okay.
otherwise there are 4 talks today, so we won't finish on time.
Yeah. Yes, I will try to complete it in the 30 minutes that you have allotted to me. But since previously it was a little more, so I will try to complete it in that.
Yeah. Okay, no worries. Yeah.
Hi, Preeti, can you hear me?
Yes, Aditya, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
These are what मैं सुना miss कर दिया. These are second year guys or first year?
MD students are first year. Some may be
अच्छा,
repeaters because
okay.
they haven't completed their credits. DMMCH are repeat from 18 and 19 because we haven't had the new batch ना अभी.
और total expected कितने हैं लोग?
मेरे को exactly याद नहीं है because PhD students are not coming ना अभी तो, but 50 तो होने चाहिए at least.
50.
हाँ.
And you somehow you monitor their attendances also, or how does it happen?
वो बोलेंगे वैसे ही ड्रैगन लेडी कोई कम है ये जो अटेंडेंस भी मॉनिटर
नहीं, I'm just wondering कि
नहीं they are otherwise also upset कि repeat करना पड़ता है. पहले बात तो अटेंड करना पड़ता है, वो सबसे मुश्किल है सबके लिए.
Because I just wonder कि I mean, you know, so this course once they do, so they are marked on it, or they are asked questions on it, or it's just like
it's your choice whichever way you want to do. You want to make it interactive, but I don't know. I haven't had
interactive में actually we'll waste more time, I guess.
And moreover, virtual में ना we haven't had very good experience because they just don't answer.
Yeah, so, I'm sure. And दूसरा चीज ये मैं before we start, I think we have another 2-3 minutes. So
hello, Nagendra.
I think
hello,
Nagendra.
Yeah.
Excuse me, ma'am. Hello.
Yeah, Aditya.
I was just wondering कि how many of them are, you know, they sort of actually listen, because सभी के videos बंद हैं, muted तो सभी हैं.
Actually पीछे video on करो ना सबके तो वो bandwidth कम हो जाती है तो फिर वो
हाँ नहीं I know. Yeah. So I'm supposing randomly we ask anybody, you know, I don't know.
You can absolutely. If you can see who are the participants and you want to ask something, you just do it.
No, I'm just asking ki whether just I'm just picking up Dilip Ramesh. Dilip Ramesh, can you hear me? Dilip?
ये तो गौरव
yes sir, I can hear you.
Okay.
Student है तो सुनेगा.
Okay. अच्छा, good. You know, my only purpose was that when whether people are sort of listening, because
I think we just
lot of effort goes by Preeti to design this course, and
yeah, I just
he's a
have to
Aditya,
state that
Aditya seems to be in a ominous mood right now. So participants, watch out. Be, be attentive.
अरे आप सर आप रूम डिपार्टमेंट में
क्या करें?
कुछ लोग काम करते हैं.
मैडम प्रीति का ऑर्डर है तो काम करना पड़ेगा ना. ये मुझे वैसे भी ऐसा टॉपिक दिया है सोशल मीडिया. इट्स लाइक उल्टे बांस बरेली youngsters who are experts of social media usage. I'm going to teach them about social media usage.
I'm not asking you to teach them how to use social media. I'm asking you to teach them how to use social media in medical profession.
Perhaps what is more important is to tell them when not to use and how not to use it.
If you could tell them and
they have all the.
It will be the best.
But I think Gaurav, amongst ourselves, हमारे लोगों में से probably you are the one who uses it most and quite effectively. So you are the best suit. Class 3 indication बतानी है बस आपको when not.
So whenever.
हाँ 36 तो हो गए.
हाँ just 15 minutes more.
प्रीति ने 305 का डेडलाइन दिया.
हाँ तो 302 हो चुके हैं. 36 हो गए. 40 पे प्रीति let's start.
हाँ बिल्कुल. Another couple, otherwise एक हाथ 2 मिनट में you can start.
Yeah, share कर लो screen तब तक.
Preeti, I hope you have communicated to everyone the sequence in which we are going.
क्या फिर से बोलना गौरव.
Sequence in which we are going.
हाँ मैंने WhatsApp किया ना तुम लोग को सबको.
Okay, ठीक है. तो वही बात है. Social media savvy नहीं.
Punita, then Aditya, then Sanjay, and then last is you.
Okay, good.
हाँ.
स्टेडियम फुल हो गया. 40 हो गए.
कोरम पूरा हो गया.
कोरम पूरा हो गया.
But I'm seeing quite a few PhD students also. Zainab, you can't hear me?
I can hear you now.
Acha, I thought that I said that from 30th onwards it will be for clinical students, and your PhD students will have a separate second week which Dr. Alok Kumar from Molecular Medicine is organizing. Because rest I couldn't identify who all are the other PhD students. I know you, so I picked you up.
Actually, I was just typing the message in the chat box on behalf of my batchmates. We were confused actually. Then should we leave today? Or...
You can tell all your batchmates that from this Monday, from today onwards, this week, whatever I have sent is only for clinical people.
So, ma'am, from when should we join? Because
I
in the
think
schedule,
second, Dr. Amita had circulated na 2nd to 7th.
Yes, ma'am, 2nd to 7th.
वो तुम लोग का है ना? You finished one assessment, so you will get a separate assessment from Dr. Alok Kumar from Molecular Medicine, who's your course coordinator for the second week.
Okay, ma'am. Okay,
yeah.
ma'am.
So
I'll tell everyone.
All those who are PhD students can log out, and if you want to attend is a different issue, but you don't have to.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. I think we can start, Punita.
I think that will be a good
we
idea.
won't finish on time. Yeah.
Share the screen.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we are about 40 of us now. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
clearly.
Right. Good. And thank you, Preeti, for inviting me on this beautiful holiday for this course on communication, which is actually very close to one's heart, because that's a part of our job. Having said that, I think we, Dr. Aditya Kapoor and myself, we have been given the mandate to talk about communication in medicine in a separate 12-hour course, which has, I think, 1 credit point, and you are welcome to join that. This part of the communication is just very briefly, I'll allude to this. बट बाकी जो डिटेल्स में करेंगे वो हम डेडिकेटेड कोर्स में करेंगे. सो व्हाट इज कम्युनिकेशन? Basically, if you have to put it very simply, it is any kind of meaningful and fruitful interaction between two human beings is communication. And it's both verbal and non-verbal. Verbal is whatever you speak, whatever you write, spoken, written language, that is all verbal. But uh, you'll be surprised that actually that's only 1/3 of the entire communication skill of yours. 2/3 is non-verbal. Non-verbal ka matlab hota hai that the kind of environment you've created, the tone that you use. If you've not used the proper tone, the whole meaning gets misconstrued, and what you wanted to convey was probably not what reached the other person. Similarly, for mannerism, the touch, excess touch or under touch, as at human level, touch is very important for us, especially as doctors, and more so as compassionate doctors. Then the eye level that you are maintaining, your position vis-a-vis the patient, whether you're sitting down, the patient is lying down, or you're standing and the patient is sitting, versus both are sitting, both are dressed, the patient is rather dressed properly, that will have a more effective kind of a communication with the patient. So at work, we are forever communicating. This is nothing new. We've always, human beings have since time immemorial always communicated. But at work, we communicate with the patients and their family routinely as clinicians, with our peers, colleagues who are a part of our team or outside our team, our seniors and juniors. And all sorts of communications actually have a different code of conduct and different decorum that you need to maintain. The way you would conduct with your seniors would not be appropriate when you're doing that with your peers. Similarly, that familiarity that you would have with your share with your peers, you would not obviously have with your patients or family members. So the main mandate is communication with patients. With patients, we are communicating. It's always it's a two-way process, but more of talking and more of non-verbal cues happen from our side, because we are forever having to pass information to them, instructions, counseling them, have to respect their confidentiality issues, and also we have to allow questions to them, so that they can quiz us, and they can allay their anxiety, or whatever questions they have in their mind can be sorted out. Similarly, at the end of each communication appointment that we have to summarize it for them, strategize for the next visit, and also ensure that they feel that we would be available whenever they were to come here next. So like I said, it's a two-way process. There's a sender, there is a receiver. We do our communication through a medium. And of course, the better communication always happens when you get the right kind of feedback or response, which again may be completely non-verbal. If you are telling the patient something and the patient is looking here, there, or looking at his watch or outside at the door, then obviously there is some kind of a barrier that is existing between you and the patient. And the onus is on you rather to get get that barrier dropped so that you can have an effective communication with this particular person. There are many things that are required for communication. The first and the major thing, that the bottleneck, rather, I should say, is the art of listening. If we have to communicate well as doctors, as human beings, we are supposed to start with listening. If we listen better, we will communicate better. And that's probably why Mark Twain said that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth and not the reverse. So let's learn to the art of listening first. I talked about barrier in my previous slide. So there are multiple barriers that exist, uh, for effective communication. You may be saying the right words, but if the language is not correct, or even the accent is not correct, what we are speaking over here, everybody can understand, because that's a common sort of dialect, common accent, even though the medium of spoken language remains English. But supposing the same thing I would be speaking in, say, Scotland, maybe the person will not understand with the accent that I have. So it's all that is very important. Values and belief, the gender, age, our educational level, economic status. I mean, everything matters when you are trying to ensure effective communication. Physical barriers. आप कमरे के एक कोने में हो, बीच में there is a barrier, and then you are trying to communicate. That will not work. Your attitude, you have, it's not one to one. It is like from one, there's a level of patronization that is happening, or you are looking down, sort of, or at least the patient is perceiving that you are looking down, is never going to land up in effective communication. So all these things are very important. Timing of your whatever you have to speak, you have to ensure that the message is gone loud and clear, and of course patient has trust in whatever you are saying. So that was regarding communication, but I will wind up by this part of my talk by giving you a story of a failed communication, because if there is effective communication, there is failed communication. Failed communication could be because of a variety of reasons. Some of them would be that the patient is difficult. He's not able to, he's not allowing you to have a relationship, therapeutic relationship with him or her. Manipulative patient, transverse reaction. There are lots of issues related to failed communication. So the story is just about a week back, when I had a very miserably failed communication with one patient group, with one patient and his family. And that was that this patient comes to us. He has been treated elsewhere, and he takes an appointment from the EOPD to come to us. The EOPD has one resident who's sitting, who explains to them that they are better off if they go back to the center where they have been treated. Over there, the patient's son-in-law tells the resident doctor that look here, I know why you're sending me, I have a fair idea why you're sending me. So now this was conveyed, very rightfully so, and the patient, because he had an appointment, comes to our OPD. The patient had a preformed or a preconceived notion that all these doctors are like this. I sit in that room with my own preformed notion that this guy thinks this way for us. So we start the conversation like that, and we land up in an altercation. He says that I know why you're sending me, and all that. I don't want to get into the details. So little down the line, I realized that the communication had been fractured. There's no point in my trying it. What I did after that was I called the EOPD and asked her to take over, explain to the patient and the other attendants, after giving them a breather and withdrawing myself from the stage. So could I have done better? Even after 25 years of working, I still fail in my communication occasionally. Could I have done better? Yes, I could have. I could have stopped my preformed notions. I could have recognized these pre-visit signs, and I could have ensured that I do not get drawn into this conflict. So that's just a kind of a preamble that I have to give for the course that we will be taking about communication, effective and failed. So I would just say that effective communication is a very holistic statement. It is influenced by everything: the ethnic, cultural backgrounds, professionalism, the social milieu, education, financial, everything needs to be factored in if you want to have a good communication with the patient. So then we come to the breaking of bad news. Now, this is nothing but another communication, another spectrum within the uh, mm, uh, communication skills that we are about to learn. So let's talk about what is bad news. Bad news is something that actually drastically alters one's view about his or her future in an adverse manner. जो चीज मुझे लगती है कि कल को ये मेरे लिए हानिकारक हो सकती है या मुझे नुकसान देगी या मुझे अनहैप्पीनेस देगी, आई विल व्यू दैट एज बैड न्यूज, come what may, whether on a personal, professional, health scale, whatever that is. So in clinical practice, as treating physicians or surgeons, हम bad news कब break करते हैं? We are breaking bad news at the time of diagnosis for any major illness, chronic illness that is going to impact the patient's future activities, or whatever he has or she has plans for. Then the news of progression of disease or recurrence or relapse of disease, or rather failure of treatment, that comes in one spectrum. And the news of death. So I will try to complete all these if the time permits. Now, why do we find that bad news breaking is so difficult? We are doing that, but we always find it difficult. If I could help it, I would ask somebody else to do it for me for another patient. So why do clinicians find it difficult? Their perspective is that we were never taught this. No formal training happened to teach us. So we could never individualize for a particular patient. And we also know that because it is bad news, the patient or the family member will take it adversely. We are scared of their outburst or agitation, and so we feel that we will not meet up to their expectations. That is from our point of view. There is a patient's perspective also when he or she hears about the bad news. जाहिर सी बात है, if there is bad news that is in the form of a major illness, the patient feels that there is a loss of control over one's life or a part of life. There are social stigmas today. If somebody says कि मुझे COVID हो गया है, that is a stigma enough even today, even in educated people. And so I would not rate it as good news, but bad news. It would, because I'm losing control over that segment of my life. There is blow to one's confidence, dignity. So you can expect some degree of a storm in one's life when one hears the bad news. How to deal with it? Well, first thing we have to understand is that all patients are same, in the sense that if there is a major illness, nobody is going to feel happy. कोई खुश नहीं होगा कि उसको एक debilitating illness हुई है. So we can expect that the reaction would be more on the sadder, melancholy side than on a happier side. At the same time, we must realize as doctors that each patient is unique. So you may have to handle the adverse or sad news for them in a manner that is commensurate with their age, education status, ethnicity. You have to factor those things into account: profession, values, beliefs, and all. Because we have to realize that each patient will respond to it differently. a lady who's 35 years old and has been diagnosed of, say, breast cancer, who has two small children, she will respond to it differently, and her family, her husband would respond to it differently as compared to, say, an 85-year-old who comes up with a similar illness. The family will be more in acceptance of the fact. The patient would also be more in a resigned acceptance state of affairs. But once you part with this bad news or information that is going to adversely affect their future, you can expect a certain degree of initial reactions, both on the part of patient and caregivers. Usually this is the gamut of reactions that you get to see. The shock and denial is first, followed by anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Now, you may not see all of them. You may see in some it starts off with anger, some may skip bargaining, go straight on to depression. For some, shock and denial may last for 3 months, 3 weeks. For some, it might be 3 hours. We don't know. Those are individual variations you get to see. But when we say shock and denial, we actually means that नहीं, मेरे को तो नहीं हो सकता, आप दोबारा चेक करिए, कहीं स्लाइड तो नहीं गलत हो गई. So that kind of response you might get. Anger, why me? मैंने क्या किया है? मैंने तो सिगरेट भी नहीं पी, फिर मुझे क्यों हार्ट अटैक हुआ? बार्गेनिंग, अच्छा ये न्यूज शायद आई थिंक इतना बुरा नहीं होगा, ठीक ही होगा, और अगर ठीक होगा ना मैं जाके 100 रुपया मंदिर में जाके दूंगी. Bargaining with whatever power that you consider is important. Depression, क्या करें? Suddenly losing control. So it's a phase of preparatory withdrawal. So this depression occurs far more common in these major illnesses than we would like to acknowledge or believe. Even, self-harm tendencies develop, but we have to be sensitive enough and vigilant enough to notice these changes so that we can save the patient from harming himself or herself. Peaceful, resigned acceptance comes only in very few people and occasionally. And if it comes, I think it's a very good thing to have happened for the patient. As doctors, our goals are that we explain clearly in clear language without using euphemisms like softer words, because sometimes patients cling on to whatever softer words you wish to tell them and do not want to actually face the reality. Gathan hai. So they don't want to say ki cancer hai. So you have to use words which are clear and appropriate. At the same time, explain the patient to the patient, support the patient, address their overwhelming emotions, whatever kind, and offer them whatever hope you can. It should not be false hope. It has to be whatever you can kind of hope. Another important thing as doctors or harbinger of these bad news we have to consider is that we are passing on this vital piece of information through a very difficult mindset of a patient. The patient is thinking of so many things. वो आपके पास आया था कुछ सोच के, उसको आप कुछ बता रहे हो और you're giving parting whole lot of information about the diagnosis, the disease, the treatment, the prognosis. So too much of information to assemble. And secondly, he's also thinking, अच्छा कैंसर है, अभी क्या होगा, मेरी बेटी का क्या होगा, उसकी शादी का क्या होगा, हाउ विल माय वाइफ, सर अगर मुझे कुछ हो गया तो वाइफ का क्या होगा, घर जो हमने रेंट पे लिया हुआ है उसका क्या हुआ, मेरी जॉब का क्या होगा, छुट्टी कैसे मिलेगी, मैं ट्रैवल कैसे करूंगा. So simultaneously he's processing your information that you're giving and also the background that baggage that he has, which is, as it is, underlying worries are there about these things and now they are coming into front. So you have to communicate through this maze of information and try to tell them that this is what you are having and this is how we will treat and this is what the prognosis is. सारा कुछ एक सिटिंग में बताना शायद संभव नहीं होगा, और है भी तो इट्स टू मच ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन. यू मे हैव टू पुट इन second or third interview for this kind of transmission of appropriate information. You also have to ensure that apart from passing on information, your approach should be caring, compassionate. You should offer a degree of hopefulness, which does not mean false hopes. That's very important. At the same time, as doctors, rest assured we can offer them something, and we should whatever we can. And for the patient, you may have to allow them for some time to talk, show some feelings towards, give vent to their feelings, so that they leave the room a bit lighter than what when the conversation started off. Now comes the question, who should break the bad news? If you are a final year MCH student and in 10 days time you have an exam, you are sitting in the OPD all alone, and there's a patient whom you wish to say ki aapko to prostate cancer hai. Now you tell me, if you are going to part with this information, and then he will come back because he is now confused and dejected. So he would want to know whether you will be there in another week's time, so that whatever queries he has after thinking it over or processing this information, you will be able to address. Obviously, you cannot. So you are probably not the correct person. What is said is that somebody who's reasonably senior, who has seen the natural course of this kind of illness at least 5 to 10 times, and is likely to be there when the patient comes back next on the next appointment, so that the patient's issues can be addressed, that person is the proper person to break bad news. Now, how to break bad news? So there are many models which exist. One of the commonest models is the spikes model, where it's a six-step procedure where you learn how to share the bad news. So you have to set up an interview. You have to sit with the patient or the family and try to evaluate what is it that they know, what is the gap between what they know and what they should know. And also then you pose a question to them, inviting them that would you like to know, and then comes the K part of it, that is you share the information or knowledge. When you share the information or knowledge, you also have to address the emotions, because there is likelihood when you are talking about a devastating or a major illness that there'll be some emotions. Following that comes the next step or the last step, where you strategize. Okay, we will do it this way. Hopefully, there will be some response. Then we move this way. And then finally summarize for the patient, set up the next appointment, and preferably repeat this in the next appointment also, so that the information percolates down properly. As far as the setting of the interview is concerned, you have to have a proper room, least interruptions, your body language should be good, telephones to be avoided. Now that's the why I always say this, is because OPD में if you see, आपके पास एक CUG होता है, एक आपका अपना मोबाइल होता है, एक लैंडलाइन होता है. So can you really do justice to parting with bad news in that kind of environment, where there is forever the bell is ringing and you are addressing to other issues as well? So probably not. That's the reason why I think, and we all are party to it. We are all culprits that we do this, which we should not be doing. So I talked about knowing the patient's perception, how much he or she knows, and then you invite the person, do you wish to know further on? If the patient is in a state of denial, doesn't, then we have to respect. The patient has the right to know. At the same time, the patient has the right not to know at that point in time. And I'll come to it in a while again. When you are parting with information which is not good, it is a good idea to put up a preamble or a warning shot that I'm afraid the problem is serious. It's not as light as we thought. Pause after that. Let it settle down. and then move further. When you move further, you talk about it in simple, clear, polite language with using proper body language. And you may have to repeat it also. You may have to give small information, stop, small information, pause, and then keep looking at their body language, whether they are understanding. If they're completely at loss, then it's better to abandon it today. Do it another time permitting, of course. So, like I said, repetitions, allowing for pauses, these are important thing, and you should know when to stop as well. Once the information has gone down, obviously you can expect some kind of emotional reaction, and you should know how to address. Empathizing, offering some compassionate words and occasional touch are a good idea in this manner. And like I said, ki, this is to deal with the addressing of bad news to the patient and to the family. We over with passage of time, as your clinical practice increases, you will learn how to give part with bad news. But one thing that you need to really say is that I wish to say is that you need to avoid criticizing fellow colleagues, people that they have been referred from. That's not a good idea. It'll never have, the patient will never trust you. The patient will never trust that colleague, of course. So I talked about summary and strategizing. So bottom line is that there's obviously something that we can offer to the patient, and that is hope, and some realistic hope is something that we need to offer. At the same time, it is important that when we journey with them, we prepare them for the worst, because ultimately they have to stand up to the illness if the prognosis is not good. This is one case that I have put up where the major concern of the family was ki inko nahi batana. She was an agitated about 60-year-old lady, and the family was very clear, inko nahi batana. We set up an interview, and we tried to perceive ki inko kitna pata hai, and realized that her treatment, her decision towards taking treatment was lack of treatment or no treatment was based on lack of knowledge. When we invited her to कि हम आपको बताएंगे, अगर आप चाहें तो हम बता सकते हैं कि क्या है, we realized that she was not in a state of preparedness, so we abandoned the procedure. We took another sitting with the family, convinced them. After that, in the third session, broke the news to the lady, and she took it calmly after that and opted for optimal treatment thereafter. So I think, Preeti, if I don't have time, I can wind up now, or I have 2-3 slides. It's about when the patient's deterioration happens, how we should deal the feeling of despair that they get to see or face, and what we can offer, because something we can always offer, even if it is to reach out to them. Around death, our role changes a little more, in the sense that dying patients communicate only non-verbally, and our verbal communication becomes more important. We have to become sensitive towards the patient who's dying, the family members who are around and are in an emotionally charged state, and also the other indoor patients surrounding them. They all, their sensitivity we have to factor in. At the time of death, it is our mandate, not the mandate of the nurse or the attendant, to divulge the fact that the patient is no more. We have to take them along the journey, how we resuscitated and were not successful, and then conclude clearly that the patient unfortunately is no more. Again, no softer words, because no paraphrasing, because otherwise it can be again misconstrued in this state. So breaking bad news is a testing ground for our lot of our professional skills and abilities. And it is said that if we do it badly, the patient and the family may never forgive us. But if we do it well, they might never forget us for that. So with that, I invite any questions if there are any. And that would be all.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening.
I'm Dr. Jayakumar. Thanks for the presentation, ma'am. Actually, regarding this breaking bad news,
Yes.
just wanted your thoughts on this. Actually, now with the COVID situation also, and usually with the in the ICU care, sometimes in some patients we expect sort of unexpected deaths or unexpected worsening. So what happens is, because of this, many ICUs and sometimes even us, we sort of uh, counsel the patient beforehand itself and give them a lot of negative ideas, which leads to a lot of mental trauma for the patients. Even back home, my relatives who are having COVID, who are admitted to the ICUs, they have been given grave prognosis upfront. Actually, when the patient saturation is also 97%, they have been given poor prognosis. And so this kind of defensive practice actually is what is your thoughts on this, ma'am? Like, how better can it be done? Because this definitely leads to mental trauma. It's always better to under promise and over deliver. But that apart, how can it be done differently in communication? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, Jayakumar, you raised a very pertinent point, and actually, you said it yourself. This is defensive medicine that we practice, and we would like to under-promise and overperform as doctors, because our intentions are that the patient goes back home safe and sound. And yes, it is traumatic, and we all in our own families have faced this. The problem is, okay, this is like COVID situation or ICU care. These are all acute sort of illnesses where it's a touch and go many a times. If you're talking about chronic illnesses oftentimes give you the time to journey with the patient and their family member, to take them along. And so by the time it actually reaches to the point of no return, the family is well reconciled to the fact that acha hua tha, fir nahi hua, then the disease came back, and gradually the downhill was so gradual that it gave you time. Unfortunately,
Yes.
in ICU care, it is not giving us time. So that's the problem with acute illnesses.
Acute.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, Preeti, can I go ahead? Punita, shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, just before I start, just adding to what Punita was saying, Jayakumar, I think another important point which you had raised is, in this ICU situation, what I personally believe, again, it's my opinion, that all the all the team members have to be on the same page in terms of counseling the patient. So, multiple messages should not be given. And you rightly said, so that is why a plan beforehand should be made, what exactly the patient needs to be told. Because many a time it happens for these acute patients, people are always defensive. So one guy will say something else, the other person, prognosticates in a different way. So that way a balance can be maintained so that you know exactly what all the team members are telling to the patient. So that is another point which can be sort of added. Yeah. What do you say, Punita?
I think you raised a very, very important thing, that we should all be on the same page when we are talking about this.
Yeah. So my brief in the next few minutes would be communication with colleagues. So Punita covered about patients. So there will be a bit of overlap, what is communication. We all know that. I'll add my perspective to it, and I have divided the talk into three parts. Colleagues, what we mean by colleagues. So we'll come to that. So Punita explained it in a good fashion that Communication is, you are exchanging information, messages, thoughts. Semantically speaking, all of us, intuitively feel that is just data presentation, speech, text, etc. But what we all sometimes forget, that having good interpersonal skills and having good physician patient, which Dr. Punita covered very lucidly, and having even better physician colleague relationship is part of a good communication skill. So that is one important thing which we will spend some minutes upon in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Why is having a good communication skill with your colleagues important in medicine? Because today medicine is a very communication intensive practice. Currently we all are dealing with super specialty care. Care is fragmented, divided across numerous physician groups, medical specialties, ICUs, intensivists, surgical specialties. There are multiple handoffs which are there. Critical information pertaining to patient has to be effectively communicated to optimize patient care. Often this information, because of lack of communication skills between colleagues, the information gets lost. And our professional survival and of course the patient's good outcome depends on having good communication skills. Becoming a doctor, becoming a learned physician, we all know is a long continuous, it's a hard work. We all study for it, we all train for it. But apart from these two technical aspects, we should spend some time not only to master the art of presenting our data, PPTs and other lectures, seminars, that is one part of it, but mastering the art of communicating effectively with our colleagues. Patients, of course, madam dealt with, but our colleagues, that is one art which we have to continuously learn and hone. And this should start when you obviously decide to become a doctor. And this practice, this skill set has to be continuously nurtured throughout your life, however senior you may be. So it's a skill which continues to improve throughout your life. Basically, it is the ability to use all aspects of the language, verbal and non-verbal, to express what you want to say. So you can use it by using words effectively, how you say these words, and of course, having a good, positive body language to convey what you want to convey in a very favorable manner. And the important thing is this needs to be a part of a training program, which unfortunately it is not. How to write text, how to prepare visual aids, how to speak in public, all these things are partly covered. You guys are fortunate that SGPGI has these courses. I'm sure you guys are very good at it, at writing good case notes, at presenting papers in conferences, having ward rounds, journal clubs, seminars. So this will take care of these first three parts. But how to interact with medical colleagues is again a very, very important thing, which, as I said, we need to learn. And what we need to learn, I'll just show you my perspective on it. As madam also showed, communication is a complex process. There is a sender here, there is a receiver here. So I say something, so that does not end it. The guy whom I am talking to will receive and interpret that information. I have to wait for that to happen, and he will try to give me a feedback, and I have to receive and interpret that feedback as well. To work. So it's basically a multi-step process. And that is the difference between information and communication. Information is a passive process, just giving out some stuff. But communication is actually getting through to the other person. So that is the subtle difference between information and communication. And Dr. Punita very importantly mentioned in a single line, we cannot not communicate. The very attempt, the very fact that I am not communicative actually communicates something about my personality, that there is something wrong. Remember our colleagues. So I'll cover both seniors and juniors. They are not mind readers. This is not supposed to be a sermon or something. But so that is why I say it is a two-way process between seniors and juniors. We are not mind readers. People will judge us by our behavior, not by our intent. So my intent may be the best possible, but if it is not translating into a good behavior with my colleagues, that intent is no good. And remember that all this communication skill, it is situational, it is environmental, it is culturally driven. So there is a context three-pronged context to it. Any interaction in a formal meeting may be very different from an interaction which takes place at a social gathering. So you have to interpret that communication in that particular context. Environmental context may be there. What time of the day I am interacting with somebody, whether I am too busy, whether I am fatigued, whether I am inundated by work. And of course, cultural context that comes into play when communication happens across multiple cadres, as will happen in a super specialty care. Differing backgrounds of people, language barriers may be there. So, before you take a judgment, before you take a call on somebody's behavior, remember all these three factors. Why is this a problem now? Because, as I mentioned, it does not figure prominently in our training, either at the undergraduate level, even the time of recruitment or appointment as consultants. We all know that is a problem with our education system. More focus is on technique, skills, how good an operator I am. Many a time it is not factored in how good a team member I am or I may be. So that is a very, very important thing which we need to understand. And that is why we need to be very good communicators, because once you go out tomorrow in the world, you will have to be a good communicator to be successful. Remember, you are unlikely to get on well with everyone all the time. So that is very important. I may not be able to favorably impact everybody all the time. There is a variation in individuals' capacity to tolerate or understand differences of opinion, to tolerate conflict, to tolerate dissent. Every person has his own threshold. So you have to interpret that while talking to that person. In the West, in fact, they have done studies on it. A leading barrier to physician-physician communication is lack of reimbursement, because most of the medicine in the West, and I'm sure over here also now, it is finance-driven. So there is no actual reimbursement for time spent on contacting and speaking with colleagues about a patient's care. Most of it is electronically driven. You write notes and you hope that the referring doctor or the consultant gets that information. Many a time he will get it, but we don't actually pick up the phone and talk to people. We are paid for doing more procedures and seeing more patients. So that is the unfortunate part of it. That is why these lectures, these courses are important for all of us. I'm not saying it is for you also, it is for us also. And this is a poll done in US a couple of years ago. When patients were asked, they say that I was referred to numerous doctors and specialists. It happens in super specialty care. You feel that no one really wants to help you. I just wish that they would pick up the phone and speak to each other. It would save me lots of time, money, and unnecessary procedures. So we should, remember that when we are seeing patients, it will be faster and better for the patient if we can sometimes pick up the phone and communicate that information to our colleagues, to our residents, to other super specialty department. It helps. So I'll just briefly cover communication barriers can occur across specialties between referring doctors, senior and junior colleagues, a very, very important thing, doctors and paramedical staff. So when we refer patients to each other, it is very, very important to write a particular reason for referral so that a sense of urgency is conveyed. By that, I don't mean, we have our consultation forms, don't take routine and emergency just like that. You just have to specify what is the exact reason for referral. And equally important for the receiving department, for instance, if it's cardiology, we always tell our guys that it is not enough to advise an echo. Unfortunately, it happens. You guys are witness to it. It is not sufficient to advise an echo. It is our duty to sort of get it done and give a feedback to the parent department what needs to be done now. But this does not happen. There are very frequent gaps and errors, and often we know patients and their relatives become their own messengers of medical records, which is very, very unfortunate. For instance, I'll just give you some examples. Call to cardiology resident from the ED guy, come and see a patient. So he assumes it's a run-of-the-mill case, reaches the ward, emergency ward. After rounds, after an hour later, patients are having ongoing acute MI. These things happen. Another 30-year-old female admitted by the consultant for MRI on a weekend, suspected carotid dissection. Clinically, of course, normal. Case file had no notes by the consultant. Ward resident was only aware that an MRI needs to be done and unfortunately sent the patient on leave for the weekend. And he was reprimanded by the consultant the next day when the MRI confirmed carotid dissection. So there is no communication in the first case regarding urgency, no communication regarding reason by the consultant. So it happens across cadres. One is at the resident level, another is at the consultant level. So these inadvertent things will happen and will lead to errors or mismanagement. So we should avoid them. Communication is very, very important. For instance, again, familiar with this form, I'm just giving examples. This happens. I'm not saying that cardiology is above this. It happens with us also. So query murmur, the guy is right, yes, present. So these are witty remarks, good remarks, but they are not helpful for the patient. Again, a reference to the medicine. Regarding Mrs. X, please see and advise. So a witty remark, I have seen your patient and advise you to do the same. So again, these things are humorous, they look cute, they look funny, but the patient is the ultimate sufferer. So our reason for referral should be clearly specified. At the same time, if I am examining the patient and I am responding to a referral, my plan of action has to be crystal clear and concisely spelled out. So if you see a poll, this is published in a prestigious journal, Archives of Internal Medicine, 5,000 physicians were polled in US. Most of them said that they did send information while writing a referral or while responding back. Unfortunately, half of the guys said they actually went through the notes. Either they didn't receive it or they didn't read it properly. So that is the point I'm trying to make, that even if the information is spelled out, sometimes these cases fall through the system. We don't read things properly. And as a result, ability to provide good care is always jeopardized. So we should be careful about that when we are referring patients, when we are responding to referrals. Go through the files, go through the referral notes clearly and completely. Senior, junior colleagues, this is a very, very important topic again. Senior colleagues, we know that there is a difference in power, status, hierarchy. It will be there. But as seniors, it is our duty to be good role models and mentors. We should avoid read my mind questions. We should try to create an environment where my junior, not only he should gain skill, which is my duty, it is my duty as a mentor, but he should feel safe to speak up, feel safe to ask questions. He should be rewarded for initiative. So these are the things which, this is my skill set, which I have to build up. I should be able to encourage decision making, independent thought process. I don't want a junior colleague or a team member who is a clone of myself. I want him to have an independent thought process so that I am benefited. That is why as seniors, we should be able to listen well. As somebody said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should be able to listen twice as much as we can speak. So that is a very, very important ability we should all build up. Listen well. Punita also said, listen actively, listen patiently. And I know that my game will be raised if I work with a challenging junior. He will be an asset to my team. But that is my duty, to give him that confidence, to be able to ask me questions, to be able to create doubts in my mind. So I have to be good enough to give him that opportunity. Again, the role of the junior colleague, he has to be curious, inquisitiveness. These are all good qualities. He should be permitted to be freely able to question the consultant rather than pondering for hours over a case, make mistakes, fight with self-doubt, discuss with seniors. But again, that situation will only realize if it will only arise if the relationship is secure enough, how receptive the senior is. And to build this relationship, to avoid the fear of reprimand, ridicule, avoid rigid, closed communication channels between seniors and juniors, it's a mutual two-way process. The responsibility for which, in my opinion, lies slightly more on the senior guy rather than the junior. So if we want to build a good team, that is the way to go about it. So this should not be the relationship. It is unfortunately there a lot of times, but ideally it should be like this, wherein we should be able to fulfill our role models as mentors to the best of our abilities. That is how juniors will sort of look up to us, and that is the way teams are going to be built. Lastly, amongst doctors and paramedical staff, we are trained to communicate differently from paramedical staff. So we should not try to run them down because their training, their skill sets is different. Nurses, if you go through their round books, try to read them once. They have a broad and narrative descriptive style. They paint the bigger picture. They do not try to a crystal clear pinpoint diagnosis as doctors are trained to. So that is why it is our duty to bridge these communication styles, especially for, Dr. Gaurav will be coming in next. I think Dr. Sanjay Bihari will be there. All of the guys who are working in, critical care areas, surgeons, intensivists, we in the cath lab, we are all witness to the fact that paramedical staff who are experienced, they often offer opinions which will change your management acutely in a difficult situation. So their inputs should be asked for and actively asked for. So that is how, a good environment, a good working relationship will come about. And this is again some published data from UK when they questioned ICU nurses, and it was confirmed that nurses reported much lower levels of communication openness with the doctors. So that is one thing which we really need to work upon. And organizational setup should ensure that doctors are sort of trained to listen to paramedical staff or to take their opinion when it matters. So to conclude, keys to remember, if this is just a philosophical lecture, there is no data, no evidence, but whenever you want to build up your communication skills, it is important that organize your thoughts critically before you speak. Be polite and courteous to everybody across cadres. Don't, your courteousness should not be driven by hierarchy. Remember that the medical world is small and people have long memories, so people will remember you. As somebody again wisely said, speak when you are angry and you will make the best speech you'll ever regret. So think before you speak. Never judge your colleagues by the impression given to you by your others. So make your own decision making, interact proactively with people, and take your own call on people. Respect hierarchical boundaries. Don't get intimidated by them. Hierarchical boundaries are important in any setup, so that is discipline, but don't get intimidated by them. For organizations, my suggestions would be that we have to organize more workshops so that doctors, paramedical staff, we interact more often across cadres. It will ensure better patient outcomes. Hospital staff, doctors, paramedical staff, technicians, everybody, we should be sensitized to the need of developing better interpersonal skills. Organizations should proactively not only recognize, but try to resolve power struggles and conflicts within departments. So that is an important thing. Recognize karna achhi baat hai, but resolve bhi karna chahiye. And again, hierarchical differences which exist, they will exist, but they should be, from time to time, give them opportunity to restructure or reorganize them according to the interpersonal power struggles and conflicts. So that is how we will move forward. In fact, UK has a set of, the GMC has a set of guidelines which they give to their resident doctors when they join, which tells them how to work in multidisciplinary teams, respect the roles of other team members, including non-medical colleagues, treat all colleagues fairly, and have all communication channels which are timely, relevant, so that patient care is shared between teams in a very, very optimal manner. So this is existent there in UK, it is there in US also. So we in India need to proactively, build these set of rules or build these handbooks. So that is the way to go forward. And benefits will be better patient care, improved mentoring, which we all want. And it is a very important marketing tool as well. In fact, if you ask patients, they will value physicians' interpersonal skills much more than their technical expertise. Technical expertise is important, but often patients wish that their doctors communicated better with each other. So we have to respect patients' wishes as well. So final messages: for a good error-free performance in future, for quality care to be delivered to your patients, not only be a good technical guy, not only present your data well, but have good interpersonal skills. And the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has been accomplished. So we often presuppose, we often pre-assume that yaar maine keh diya to dusre ne samajh liya. Aisa hota nahi. So we have to work proactively to do that. Take advantage to practice your communication skills all the time. It is a continuous process throughout your life. It is hard, it is important, and as I said, it is a must for all of us, irrespective of status and age. We should keep on working on it. We'll become better slowly and slowly. So finally, I think communication skill, I just made an acronym. assist career. It will assist your career. So what do I mean by that? Actively listen, show interest in what the other person is saying, speak with discretion, show empathy to others, introspect in your behavior also. You may be wrong. Stay constructive, give constructive criticism. Don't let your personal feelings creep into any criticism. Build and earn trust of your juniors and seniors. Give credit, be generous with credit. Allow your colleagues some space. Give them more respect. Reprimand them less. Always maintain eye contact when you're talking to people. That is very, very important skill set which we should have. Inquire about others' well-being as well, without being too nosy or too, poking into their interpersonal or their personal lives. But if you inquire about your others' well-being, that is again a good communication skill to have. And if you do all this, it will remove all communication barriers. So finally, you are familiar with this slide. Sikandar or Porus ki jab ladai hui thi, to Sikandar asked Porus, "How do you want me to treat you?" So he said, "Treat me like King Alexander." So that is my final message. Treat your colleagues as you would like to be treated yourself. So that is how I view communication with colleagues to be. So that is my personal opinion. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Punita. Both of you really touched all what is important about communication with patients' families and even with your colleagues and the junior staff. Now we move on to a totally different topic, which has been really important in the times of this pandemic, where physical OPDs, physical consultations were not possible. And Dr. Sanjay Bihari really took an active interest in conducting the telehealth and teleconsult through the eOPD. So the next talk would be by Dr. Sanjay Bihari from Department of Neurosurgery on the use of telemedicine in telehealth and teleconsults, actually how you should do it, and what is if Sanjay can touch upon what is the medical legal things we should remember during these consults. Sanjay, are you ready? Sanjay, Aditya, can you just call him up? Mera phone nahi lag raha tha. I can see that he is logged in, but I don't know whether he remembers that he has to speak now.
I am trying to call him. Yeah.
No, I'm there. Sorry.
Achha, hi Sanjay.
Just
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bihari. Now you can start.
Telehealth पे है तो मैं टेलीफोन से रिमाइंड कर दे.
ये क्यों नहीं आ रहा यार मेरा ये वो नहीं आ रहा.
शेयर करो स्क्रीन.
हाँ शेयर तो कर दिया लेकिन मेरा वो नहीं आ रहा यार. एक मिनट.
क्या नहीं आ रहा है?
एक मिनट ये नहीं आ रहा. एक मिनट इसको बंद कर दो. पावर पॉइंट नहीं आ रहा है इसमें. मेरे को उसमें जाना पड़ेगा. एक मिनट उसको बोल दो उसको करने को बोल दो यार. क्या नाम है? गौरव को बोलो यार. गौरव कर लेगा. मैं फोर्थ कर दूंगा. गौरव, हेलो.
यस संजय, हुआ?
तो इसमें ना वो मेरे को शायद उसमें वो है. आई विल नीड टू गो इनटू द कम्युनिकेशन एंड सिक्योरिटी. एक बार गौरव को बोल देना, आप वो कर देगा. मैं
अच्छा ठीक है, मैं बोलती हूँ तब तक, है ना. हाँ ओके ओके, आई विल डू दैट.
रुको मैं भी करता हूँ. रुको खोले रहना.
I'm just calling him, Sanjay.
Oh, हाँ, sorry.
हेलो गौरव. हाँ. ओहो, संजय के स्क्रीन शेयरिंग में प्रॉब्लम आ रही है. वो शेयर नहीं कर पा रहा है स्क्रीन. हाँ.
क्या हो गया?
अच्छा ठीक है, you'll take 5 minutes to reach home.
अरे sorry.
Okay, no problem. हाँ.
क्या उसको हो गया क्या? क्यों नहीं हो रहा यार? स्क्रीन शेयर क्यों नहीं हो रही मेरी? ये समझ नहीं आ रहा.
I'm extremely sorry. Gaurav was on the corridor, so it will take him 5 minutes to reach his room and then start presenting. So I will ask all of you to bear with me till then, and maybe if you had any experiences or your own comments to share on what Punita and
Okay,
Aditya
no,
have just
I'm
spoken.
ready. I'm ready. Sorry, I'm ready.
Oh, okay, fine. Thanks, Sanjay.
Okay,
जैसे ही बोला कि share करो तो you thought people will cut into your time immediately. You started
yeah, can you
sharing
see
your
my
screen.
screen? पहले तो ये बताओ, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, great.
We can see your screen.
Okay.
We can see you also.
Sorry.
Chalo. Okay.
So, एक minute.
Thank you.
Sorry about this. So, good afternoon, and I'm sorry for the little bit of problems here. I'd like to talk about telehealth and teleconsultation, the future of healthcare and the medico-legal issues involved. So, the first
हो गया उसका screen share हो रहा है.
we already
नहीं आराम से फिर अब तो शुरू हो गया. हाँ, okay.
We already know that telemedicine refers to the entire spectrum of technology, armamentarium, and processes that requires us to take history taking, conduct a clinical examination, perform investigations, manage a patient with the consultant and the patient at physically different locations. So this is a very, very important aspect. And in this COVID era, I think telemedicine has really been established. And it actually presupposes that there is a personal computer available, which could be either a laptop, tablet, smartphone. There is a good video conferencing facility. There is adequate connectivity. There is software to capture, store, transfer, visualize data, and enable the teleconsultant at the remote end to view reports and digitally manipulate images. So before we go into the nuances of teleconsultation, let's talk about what goes on in SGPGI. It's quite a well-developed affair, and it has actually taken 25 years to develop. So 25 years of excellence is the logo on SGPGI, and it has taken 25 years to develop a complete telecommunication unit in association with the School of Telemedicine and Biomedical Informatics. And this has been supported by the Government of India and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So there are two different aspects that we cover together. One is the electronic COVID care system, that is ECCS. And the second is electronic outpatient department. What is electronic COVID care system? Electronic COVID care system is a hub and spoke model in which different hospitals of the state, they communicate with a higher medical college or a postgraduate institute, and then teleconsultation is provided. And an EOPD system, it refers to the common OPD that you have all experienced, in which you go to the outpatient clinic and you communicate with a particular patient. So both of them go simultaneously, and the government is really interested in the ECCS because it means that you have interconnected every single hospital. There are three levels of tertiary care system, from the primary center, which is the primary health centers, to the divisional hospitals, to the medical colleges, to the postgraduate institutes. So all of them have been connected together and linked via telemedicine. And then we also have EOPDs in which patients sitting at remote areas can communicate with the doctor. And this also includes e-learning and e-examination. So this is what we have on the second floor of the School of Telemedicine and Biomedical Informatics, where you have a Zoom facility, you have a landline system, you have a WhatsApp system available on 2 phones, you have email and fax, and you also have 2 people sitting there from 8 o'clock in the morning to till 8 o'clock in the evening, and continuously directing doctor-to-doctor queries to various doctors in the hospital. Initially, the ECCS services started with 4 specialists from a medical, surgical, intensive care, and preclinical department. And this consists of 2 shifts of 6-hour duties in which calls were received from both patients and doctors. Now, with the start of the outpatient clinic in the new OPD block, the EOPD has merged with the ECCS, which is the electronic COVID care system, from the 25th of July to facilitate direct access to clinical departments. What it means is that sometimes you will get a telephone call from the patient to a doctor, which you would normally get. But sometimes you will also get a call for COVID or non-COVID related patients, which are doctor-to-doctor consults, which you have to record meticulously. And each of the bay has dedicated telephone services which are given, and there are 26 clinical departments which are simultaneously running these services, and there are 4 departments which have EOPD in their own departments, like for example radiology, for example you have nuclear medicine, you have gynae and obs. Some of these departments have their own OPD, and more than 40,000 patients have been benefited by these services. Then there are also certain landline numbers which are directed through the SGPGI exchange. We have 2 numbers which are used for non-COVID medical consultations. And we also have 1 number which can be directed to the COVID care hospital, which are for COVID area related information. And they will be picked 24/7 within a minute. So these are all, you should know about the infrastructure that you have at the present time. So there are, at the ECCS network, we have 2 shifts. One is from 8 to 2:30 and 2 to 8:30. There are 2 technicians sitting there, and they will continuously direct calls to all facilities available all around. Now we are, the center of, the spoke. So we are the hub, which is the center of the spoke, and we have doctors from Agra, Aligarh, Bareilly, Meerut, Muradabad, and Saharanpur. So all of them report to SGPGI and we help them. And ICU and radiology will continuously 24 hours give facility for providing medical services. And patients are benefited to these telecare services and the electronic COVID system of 26 specialties, like I told you. And you see that almost 10,000 patients in a month-wise data, the data is collected and they are benefited only using these services. And now more than 40,000 patients have been benefited. Almost the other very important aspect is tele-education and administrative sessions. So what happens is that many of the consultants, they will take different small lectures for all their peripheral hospitals, where all the doctors will come in, and there are more than 129 sessions have been conducted, and 80 medical lectures have been recorded and edited, and these are simple clinical lectures for medicine. And like you see that there are doctors from the general hospital during one of the session, and all of them are interacting with doctors situated at the periphery. We are now also conducting an ongoing tele-CGR session during the COVID-19. This is the CVTS department which is conducting this. And so you have several people who log in every Saturday, and they're conducting a very nice clinical grand round session through the telecommunication system. We also have e-learning classes for College of Nursing and College of Biotechnology. And so there are different people who come, they come to the telemedicine center and they take lectures, and with all the students at the College of Nursing and College of Biotechnology, they attend these lectures. We also have a beautiful library of medical video lectures, which are archived, edited, and uploaded. And they are related, there are more than 500 videos are available. There are COVID-related videos, and they are also linked with PGI, AIMS, New Delhi, and live streaming is also possible. So many lectures related to different subspecialties are also available here. The other very important thing which telemedicine has been doing in our institute is that every evening between 5 and 7 o'clock, the entire team sits in the either the director's chambers or in the director's boardroom and communicates with all the doctors working in various areas of the COVID hospital, and treatment management, patient care, and administrative issues are discussed with round the clock. With this. This is a very nice facility. And since 25th of August, another very interesting thing which has been done is that PDCC, MS, and MCH examination has also been conducted using telemedicine. And in fact, I incidentally happened to be the first examiner to actually conduct an exam using telemedicine in the country when I did the neurosurgery MCH exam from AIMS. And this has turned out to be a remarkable success because there are different modules which are given to the residents there, and they give answers, and this has been done, and this has been very, very successfully conducted in the last batch. And I think for the next batch also, this will be the norm for the conduction of MCH exam. So you see that there are so many different areas in which we are really being benefited by telemedicine. And I wanted to just introduce my lecture using this so that you know that this is not some esoteric thing, but we are actually using it in our day-to-day clinical practice in SGPGI, and it is an integral part of our clinical practice now. So what is the use of telemedicine? So with the virtual presence of a physician, it makes the concept of distance and terrain redundant. So it's not like there is somebody else at a distance, so you can talk to a person in the US, and we've all had the nice experience of having lectures taken by very senior authorities on our respective fields. And normally would have had to pay enormous amounts of registration fees to just listen to some lecture, and now you can discuss with him, and there is no distance, no terrain involved. Body language is vital in interpersonal relationships, and you can actually demonstrate a patient, you can do a clinical examination which your doctor can actually see from a distance. Participants remain in view at all times, making it essentially a face-to-face meeting. And I've found that whenever I'm conducting a class, and it's a face-to-face class, it becomes very, very useful to actually see every candidate and talk to him directly. Telecommunication have been found to be extremely useful in rural emergencies, because you find that if there is an emergency at this, then the person knows exactly where to go, provided they have contacted you and you have assisted them. And we are doing it on a daily basis in SGPGI. This is a hub and spoke telecommunication network, and this connects all the doctors together. And we have found that all the doctors of Uttar Pradesh have come close together by this hub and spoke telecommunication model that we've all helped to establish in SGPGI. Another very interesting thing is tele follow-up and rehabilitation. And all of us consultants have realized that now poor patients don't have to come all the way for simple issues, and they can easily be followed up even with a mobile phone, and rehabilitation can be performed remotely using telemedicine. Another very important aspect is teleradiology and telepathology consultations. What happens is that many times people are not experienced enough in radiology and in pathology, and just by disseminating the information, disseminating slides, and getting feedback on it from experts, the diagnosis at the periphery really improves. Another very important aspect is telementoring of procedures. So sometimes, there's a small child with hydrocephalus in the periphery. There is a general surgeon who's a very good general surgeon. He can just put in a ventriculoperitoneal shunt or put in an external ventricular drainage, but based on telementoring, which a neurosurgeon situated in the main hospital has been doing. So it's very, very important for telementoring of procedures, and very, very complicated procedures are now possible using telementoring. Of course, CMEs and lectures are now completely online, and we've all been benefited by it. And this makes it extremely cost effective and convenient. The interesting thing is we have this before Christ versus after Christ, or you can say before Corona era versus after Corona era. You see, the interesting thing is that the impact of telemedicine is unlikely to recede. A doctor after teleconsulting is said to have remarked, "Isn't this the way it always ought to be?" And I think now telecommunication has come to stay. And even with the shifting of OPD, now we have two rooms which are dedicated to telemedicine in our institute. Are there any problems associated with? What are the medico-legal issues associated with this? One is, you are teaching, you are communicating, you are improving patient care with telecommunication and telemedicine, but there is also an element of confidentiality breach. Now, this confidentiality breach, we don't even realize. On our bedside round, The resident, goes eloquent about, the clinical status of a patient, and all the other patients and all the other staff members are also listening. And I think that itself constitutes a confidentiality breach. But now on unsecure WhatsApp, we send images without taking the consent of the patient, and not on a secure network. And that itself constitutes a confidentiality breach. We publish images of patients which, even if the patient's name is not there, the patient can be identified using images. And therefore, anytime you are publishing online or even in a journal, you need to take the consent of the patient for publication of his or her images there. And the biggest confidentiality breaches. So there is a VIP phone which comes, hey, what's wrong with this patient of mine whom I know? And without any hesitation, even the senior most consultants will blutter out every single aspect of that patient's clinical status to the person who does not have a right to actually get this information. So these are some of the important areas which I think we need to focus on and make sure that confidentiality of the patient is not breached. We have this HIPAA Act, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996 of the US Department of Health and Human Services. And I've done my fellowship at Dartmouth, and there they make you sign the HIPAA Act, and there will be some patients. So when you can access the data of patients, but there are some patients which are marked in yellow, and as soon as you press on them, there is an alarm which goes to the medical superintendent's office. And this means that unless you have a very good reason, you cannot access the files of these patients. So therefore, it strikes a balance that permits important uses of information by protecting the privacy of people who seek care and healing. Individuals have a right to access their whole health information in most cases, and the right to request amendment of inaccurate health information. And the rule provides numerous exceptions to use and disclosure of protected health information without patient authorization. It includes treatment, payment, health organization operations, and for certain public health activities. So even the billing is confidential in most of these hospitals under the HIPAA rules. Now, another very interesting concept is doctor-to-doctor referral. How liable are you? Referring a patient to another physician generally relieves the original physician of responsibility for the patient's care and reduces his or her liability. However, if the referral is not made correctly, the liability of the referring physician may increase. So this is a very important thing. The referral has to be made very, very correctly. The referral must be acceptable to all the three parties involved: the referring physician, the receiving physician, and the patient. The procedure for reimbursement of logistic costs or payment offers needs to be developed. It's still in its infancy, and informed consent is still necessary prior to teleconsulting. Another very important aspect of teleconsulting is medical records. And one important thing is that SGPGI commitment is that improper medical records can subject medical care practitioner to civil and criminal liability. And therefore, medical records must meet federal state standard for documentation, which means that even informal medical encounters should be documented. You cannot just say, well, it's fine, I had a conversation. You must document every single medical encounter that you have with the patient and put that on the HIS system. The patient confidentiality must be respected while releasing medical records, and the medical records must never be altered or fabricated. So if you get some notice from a court, please do not fabricate or alter any medical record that is already put in there. I'm sorry, this is like a busy slide, but I just give out the essential details. So when you maintain indoor records in a standard pro forma, there is a 3-year rule, which means that all records of a deceased have to be maintained for a minimum period of 3 years. Okay. If you do not maintain it for 3 years after the death of the patient, then you are liable to be punished for it. And of course, the Consumer Protection Act 1986 says that it is advisable to maintain records for 2 years for outpatient clinics and 3 years for inpatient and surgical cases. So often what we don't do is we don't maintain outpatient records. So every time you see a patient in the outpatient, it is mandatory for you to just fill out a few details at the HIS and save them. So they are saved for posterity. And for any indoor patient in a file, you have to record every single procedure and keep them for a minimum period of 3 years. But here is a caveat. The provisions of the Consumer Protection Act allows for condoning the delay in appropriate cases. So even after 4-5 years, the patient may say, well, I was a small child then, I didn't have enough sense. Now I'm an adult, now I have sense. This doctor should be punished. So you must make sure that you must keep the record even after 3 years is over. And it is important to note that in pediatric cases, a medical negligence case can be filed by a child after acquiring the age of majority. This is very, very important. So another important thing is that requests for medical record by patients or authorized attendant should be acknowledged and documents issued within 72 hours. This is as per the guidelines. And one important thing is that maintain a register of certificates. So we often just give a medical certificate. You cannot give a medical certificate without the full details of medical certificate issued with at least one identification mark of the patient or his signature being completely recorded. This is section 1.3.3. And effort should be made to computerize medical records for quick retrieval. So you see, the law is pretty stringent on this. I won't go into details, but if you go to the electronic health record standard for India, it gives you a complete table and details of how to identify patients, how to actually make discharge summaries, how to make history, how to write an e-prescription, how to have a personal healthcare and medical device interfere, how to upload images on the digital imaging and communications in medicine, the DICOM format. It talks about data privacy, the security, the audit, the data integrity, data encryption, and how to issue digital certification. So please go into this standards for electronic health record standards for India 2016. You can go into this. Another very important aspect of telemedicine is tailoring the treatment based on the patient situation. So we've had, because of telemedicine, to modify treatment, to give lesser medication, to sometimes delay referral, to sometimes give deferred treatment. Say somebody becomes COVID positive, would you want to do surgery? Would you not want to do surgery? There are several issues which have come up. And the most important thing is sometimes these patients come up and they don't have any aspect of the finances available with them. They don't know because they have not had a one-to-one discussion with you. So they don't know the finances involved. And so there are multi-dimensional strategies here, how to actually go about modifying the treatment based on the situation and the current situation and the patient situation. And the government thankfully has provided several schemes which can actually financially help the patient in this COVID era. Another important aspect is organizing teaching programs and conferences with telemedicine. You must understand whether you are actually organizing a conference or whether it's a telemedicine conference, you must accept corporate funding respecting tax laws of the land, which means that if there is a pharma company which is organizing the platform for your telemedicine and it is paying some amount to actually organize this conference, that's very important that they pay 10% to the government on whatever is spent and you pay 2% from your organization before you start using this platform. This is very, very important. The other very important thing is that you have to respect time, because you will realize that all of them, these are limited services and you have to respect time in these services. Another very important aspect of teleconferencing is publishing. Now, we know about a lot of things which come up, and I was the editor for almost 6 years of this journal, which had an impact factor of nearly 2.1, 2.7. And some of the things which we do not acknowledge during our telemedicine is acknowledging work done by peers in the field. There are two aspects to this. One is it authenticates the author's own work, and it also improves one's own citation. So this is very, very important, that if you have a group of people from India who are publishing in one particular area, you must acknowledge the work done by other people in your country. It authenticates your own work, because then it means that, oh, well, there are several cases of this particular disease in your own country, and it also improves one's own citation. The second important thing is that it's not like you take a retrospective data and just start making some telemedicine paper. An honest clinical publication starts from the day the patient first visits the doctor in the outpatient clinic. So you have to see the patient. It's not just seeing some records and then recording your thing. So you must understand that in the era today, you must see the patient using EOPD, and then you have to record, because nature shows its patterns provided you learn to recognize them. The other very important thing, which I am also in some committees which are also looking at the journals which many faculty members and residents are submitting for their promotions and for other things, and even for becoming an assistant professor in various institutes of the country. And please remember that predatory journals are an absolute no-no. So if if you have published an article in an online predatory journal, then your candidature will be summarily dismissed. You must remember this. So there's a whole list of predatory journals, and the classical feature of a predatory journal is that it will not have a good review board. Number two, it will usually charge money to publish your article, and the money will be huge in amount. Then the second important thing is the ethical issues regarding forced authorship in the era of publish and perish. This needs to be looked at. And you must always give your juniors a chance, but then also you have to kind of balance it out, because you cannot lose out on the promotion based on these. So these are some of the online publishing issues that you always need to maintain. The other very important aspect and a big problem is that when you are going online, you must also go offline and actually learn the mandatory ancillary skills which are necessary to practice your profession. For example, you must know about management, personal and professional finance, administration, law, equipment maintenance, procurement, sterilization. I've often found that residents, they do fantastic surgery, neurosurgery, they go out and do neurosurgery, but they cannot actually start anything because they don't know how to sterilize their equipment. So you must know all this. Then another important thing is retrievable record keeping is a very important aspect. Then what is a surgical set? What is a medical set? How do you actually gather equipment? And of course, ethically practicing things. These are all important mandatory ancillary skills that you must learn. So it should not be that telemedicine leads you to a platform. It's very easy to do. You can work from home, you can learn from home, but you must also go offline, hands-on, and also develop all these skills which will help you in your day-to-day thing. My final slide is a very interesting thing. It talks about a commitment to self-development, which we all have. You know, one important thing which has often come up in this era of practical examination in India, where everything is online and you can conduct an entire practical examination using telemedicine. Now what happens is that what most of the examiners who come up would like to take up simple cases, very, very clear-cut cases, and would like to take up cases in which they are comfortable. So what happens is that those subspecialties in which those senior examiners are not comfortable in, those subspecialties do not develop simply because they don't ask enough questions related to those subspecialties. So the candidates and their descendants will not really focus on those subspecialties. For example, in neurosurgery, there's a lot of details asked about spine, but when it comes to epilepsy or movement disorders, because the senior consultants themselves don't know how to actually deal with these patients, they don't ask these questions, and therefore the residents don't learn these particular areas. So there is a commitment to self-development, and developing self-awareness regarding this self-development is a very, very important aspect of this. feedback in the moment. So whenever you see the feedback is important, you need feedback from all types of sources. You have to have self-appraisal done at all times. And there is a personality-based diagnostics that is also very important. A commitment to self-development in the era of telemedicine is a very, very important aspect of telemedicine. So to conclude, I'd like to say, we'd like to see ourselves as others see us. And that is by creating self-awareness and self-development in this telemedicine era. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was a very concise, actually, your own experience which you had at ECSS, and other aspects also of teleconsult. Because I think this is the future. People are going to use it more often, and all of us should be aware of the medical legal aspects as well of the teleconsult and telehealth.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As things are moving, and we are living more and more in the virtual world. So you are bound to use social media, and as you use for the social media, as it is called, this medium of communication for your social contacts, I think it's going to be used more often for in the medical profession as well. So all of you, as Gaurav in the beginning had said, that all of you are well versed with how to use this medium of communication as a social media. You're active in the social media, but how to use it effectively and legally in your medical profession is very important. So Dr. Gaurav Agrawal from Department of Endocrine Surgery, he would try to maybe just give you an overview and an insight into how you can use social media platforms in your own medical profession. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thank you, Preeti. Firstly, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address this rather important issue and very pertinent in the current times when we are almost dependent um, on the electronic formats of communication, not just for personal interpersonal needs, but even for our professional and even clinical needs. So I don't think there would be any participant, any clinician today who has not been using social media, one or another form of social media, for communicating with each other, with patients, with all kinds of people around. So, as I said, I think it is very appropriate that we discuss how we use social media effectively, legally, morally and ethically correct, in a morally and ethically correct way. So there are, as Dr. Preeti introduced, all of you, the generation next, is so well versed with use, or rather effective usage of social media for communication. But there are certain issues which at times get overlooked. These are issues which are legal, which are of ethical nature, and those are the ones that I would like to concentrate mostly on. Well, it's no longer a matter of jokes only that in our professional work, in our clinical and professional work, we end up relying heavily on material available on the web, on the internet. And it's neither is it wrong to do that. We are, after all, practicing in an era where so many online media, online tools are available. For example, in my practice in breast surgery and breast oncology, I almost always use an online tool called Adjuvant Online. Perhaps Adjuvant Online used to be the older version. Now we have Breast Adjuvant Online, and where you put in some information, set of information, and then you are given back by the tool, by the portal, a set of recommendations how best the patient would be treated using the best possible evidence available, and which is otherwise difficult for an individual doctor to do. But at the same time, there remains a large gap between the desirable and the actual practice being done. So relating the use of social media in professional work, these are some random thoughts. These are definitely not sermons or guidelines or rules that I'm sharing with you. But of course, there are a few things which are of rather mandatory nature. For example, there are certain laws of the land which you cannot contravene and yet go scot-free. So again, all of you are quite well versed with all the possible different tools or social media platforms which can be used. Almost every one of you who is connected today has either currently being he's currently doing duties in the COVID hospitals, or in recent past would have completed COVID hospital duties, me included, and we were almost dependent on the files we would share over WhatsApp and the HIS and perhaps video calls and telemedicine software for managing our patients. So we, as Dr. Sanjay Bihari said, it's not merely a jingoistic notion that we are propagating, or we can practice electronically, or we can practice medicine with aids from telemedicine and with aids from various electronic media. We are actually doing it. We are in a very effective way using all those tools. And so while we are at it, we should rather be aware of how best to do it, how correctly it should be done. After all, we doctors, why do we need social media? We use it for our educational and professional needs, as for example, in the COVID hospital, or even otherwise, we use the PACS. PACS is not merely social media, but we all share patient material over WhatsApp, over emails, or even Facebook. For sharing these ideas and information, the social media has come up as a very effective, almost no cost, or rather low cost option for all of us to use. We also use it for debating various health issues and professional issues in a very healthy way, in an effective way, which otherwise would require many people to be together in a single room, physically. We are able to now connect, for example, today via Zoom, and address this rather complex issue doing a whole symposium or a teaching course sitting in the comforts and safety of our homes. We also use social media for self-promotion in a positive way, I hope, and to keep up with the current events. After all, we use social media to share information about a possible workshop or a conference which is coming up. And now we have the whole conferences streamed onto social media, or it's Facebook Live events, or a Zoom event. And of course, these are very effective and useful ways. At the same time, we use social media for fun. Just like everybody else, we doctors have equal right to enjoy ourselves and to unwind, to de-stress ourselves. And there's no harm in use of social media in a very thought about way, without causing any hurt or harm to anyone else, but at the same time to have fun. But social media can be a double-edged sword. It is useful, yet it has a huge potential for being used or causing hurt to someone, and therefore to yourself. Social media has the potential to it is a media for both professional communication and for personal communication. But unfortunately, on social media, the boundaries between the professional and personal may have potential to get blurred. And when this happens, there are possibilities of misunderstandings and ethical issues coming up. These can all be avoided quite effectively if one can use, or one can keep using the common sense and keep following some very simple guidances or guidelines, and be mindful of what is appropriate, what is correct, what is righteous, and avoid anything which can be unethical, immoral, or hurtful to others. As I said, there are a whole lot of laws and rules which every country has, India too, which we have to be cognizant of and we must follow. Uh, Being not aware of a law is in no way protective of yourself. You cannot take a refuge of ignorance, that I was not aware that this is something which I shouldn't be doing. You are expected, when you are using social media, you're expected to know everything relating it. You have a safe a right to freedom of speech, but that comes with a whole set of riders. It comes with whole set of restrictions on you, where not to use free speech, or freedom to speak whatever you feel like. For example, there's a whole set of framework of guidelines for use of social media for government organizations, and we, SGPGI, is indeed a government organization. Similarly, the Medical Council of India, various other regulators of the country, they have brought about a whole set of guidances for use of social media in both professional and semi-professional usage in our day-to-day lives. Remember, irrespective whether you're communicating with a friend or a family member, once you're known as a doctor, you will always be a doctor, and that is true even on social media. You may jokingly write something about, say, having an alternative medicine, but sometime in posterity it will be quoted to you as a professional advice, or it has a potential for being quoted as a professional advice. So do not forget, you would always be a doctor on social media. So what you post online is ultimately reflective of your own personal judgment, and eventually at certain stage professional judgment. Remember, you are never anonymous. You may not like yourself to be named, but anything that you post online can eventually be tracked back to you. You may share an anecdote with a friend of yours, hoping that he would keep it to yourself, but you never know. He may, with no good ill intentions, share it further with other friends, and he may quote you. And once quoted, or even if not coded, even if it is shared anonymously, if somebody wants to track it to the original source, you can definitely be tracked back to the quotation that you made can definitely be tracked back to yourself. If you post about a medical issue or blog about your day-to-day experiences in the ward, in the OPD, or elsewhere, then ethical and professional standards will apply, irrespective whether it is shared. The blog is meant to be used in a casual, non-professional way or in a professional way. When you compare this with posting your personal life anecdotes, or for example, you're sharing your child's play play session with your parents, there you are protected because you are sharing a very personal information with a personal set of people. However, if you're sharing anything which is even remotely can be seen as professional, then a whole lot of other issues come into play, including the ethical and professional standards. Even if you are blogging in personal capacity or anonymously, as I said, you would always be known as a doctor sharing some information on social media. So, in a nutshell, all your media posts are your responsibilities, and these would remain your responsibility always. Always be mindful of the ethical, the moral, and the legal standards which are expected of you by the regulators, for example, by the Medical Council of India or the State Medical Council, and the professional expectations that your peers and the society has from you as a doctor. You must respect the patients and the colleagues that you are working with, their right to privacy, their expectations from you in terms of ethical and moral standards, and take a cautious approach to anything you think could affect your professional standing, because that is something you would certainly not like to be eroded. Patient confidentiality is at all times. Am I audible? Is there something wrong with?
Audible, sir.
Audible.
Okay.
Yes, audible, Gaurav.
All right, there was some change in my screen. Fine. So I'm well connected and audible. So
Yes,
patient
yes.
confidentiality, as I said, is a serious business, and it is something you just in today's era, even in India, as people at times feel that we are relatively more protected from medical legal issues. If you are thinking that way, you are living in a fool's paradise. There are a number of legal and ethical duties that we all have towards patients, including the patient's confidentiality on social media, just as we have anywhere else. You are not expected to publish or share a patient's picture which can reveal the identity of the patient in a medical conference, or on similarly, you cannot do it on social media. Even in the most casual of the posts or blogs that you may write, or the anecdotes you may share about your day-to-day clinical experience, think very carefully whether you need to get the consent from the patient. You may be sharing a picture of yourself donned in a PPE, standing next to perhaps a ventilator, and the ventilator has on its display showing the patient's name. You may overlook this. The patient is not visible. The patient's name and CR number is visible. That's sufficient for somebody to track it to the patient's material being shared. Now, some of you may think it ridiculous, or may think that I'm trying to split a hair, but these are the kind of mundane or very minute things that are overlooked casually, which can bite back, which can come back to bite you in a serious way. Be very particularly vigilant about what you're discussing with any colleague or anyone, or even your superior, which is relating an individual or specific medical case. Even if you do enough, you take enough measures to remove all identifiable material or information that may identify a patient directly, it is still possible for the patient or their families to identify themselves. For example, if I were to share on Facebook that, oh, okay, on 6th of December 2019, I operated on a patient who had a big mole on the right cheek, and I took 20 minutes to remove this mole, and then the patient happens to be an important government functionary. This is sufficient material for somebody to track back. Oh, I was operated on 6th of December and I had a mole on my cheek, or anything which even remotely can identify the patient, and that can be used against you. So be mindful of these seemingly very innocuous set of information. You must remove all possible information from whatever you share on social media. Do not consider any patient too naive to bite back. I mean, all the medical legal cases which which doctors have come across, majority of them have come from people or patients whom they least expected to bring a medical legal case to them. So don't think this is a simpleton from a village and he would never or she would never think of doing any or making any allegation against me. Be careful not to consider any person too naive to do that. While taking or sharing pictures, not just on social media or anywhere, uh, you have to be very careful about, first of all, ask yourself, is it important? Is it unavoidable to take this picture or share this picture? And so you take or share a picture only if you must. Follow all the ethical guidelines which are available before you take a picture or share a picture of a patient. You must, as a default, take consent from the patient. And this consent at this current time has to be written consent. If you cannot take a written consent, then you are in serious trouble. You again think very seriously, very carefully. If you can, if you have the right to take the patient's picture without consent. You consider any clinical picture as identifiable picture, or where patient can be identified. You must make all efforts to mask the face, any identification marks, any mention of the name, or even the initials, the patient's registration number or Aadhaar number, or anything which is directly or indirectly linked to the patient. Even if you are just taking pictures of your own workplace, be careful not to inadvertently capture anything or anyone that can breach the confidentiality. And a good practice, I feel, is ask a peer, ask a friend to review anything that you have captured or you want to capture. Is it okay for me to take this picture? And is it okay for me to share this picture? And is it okay from legal viewpoint, from medical ethics viewpoint, and moral viewpoint? Maintain professional boundaries. It's important that we keep a fair distance with patients. Patients over a period of time will become acquaintances and eventually friends. There's nothing wrong in it. But by and large, be careful not to let that professional distance blur away too fast. Remember, social media has that potential of blurring the professional and the personal boundaries very easily. I think a golden rule could be, do not accept friendship requests from patients on Facebook. Do not let them share their personal, and neither you share your personal events or pictures through WhatsApp or Instagram or whichever other social media way. However, there would be times when there would be need, you yourself may feel need to use to befriend a patient after a long careful thought about process. You think that the patient is indeed now a friend, and then there's nothing wrong with a careful valued judgment about taking a valued judgmental decision about it. For example, doctors are likely to have friends who become patients and not the other way around, or former patients over a period of time would become friends, and that will make it impossible to maintain the online boundaries that I'm talking about. Again, going back to very careful thought about what you share on social media. Informality and real-time nature of social media are two of its greatest strengths. After all, we use social media because primarily of these reasons. But equally, these are also the potential pitfalls. These are equally the problems, the reasons for major problem we land up in while using social media. Social media is certainly not the right place to let off the steam or speak your mind. If you're not happy with your boss, that's not the right place. You go and speak to him in person. Mind you, there's a saying that words, once they leave your mouth, they're like a permanent blot, a permanent mark of whatever you thought in your mind. Social media or written words are even worse because they can be retrieved at any given time in posterity. So you must think very carefully before you share anything or speak your mind off on the social media. The golden rule I consider is, do not post anything when you are angry or when you're drunk or too emotional. And don't say or reveal anything on social media that you would not like to be printed in a newspaper. Pass this, any emotions or any thoughts that come to your mind and you feel like sharing on the social media. You may even type it, but do not share it. Let it let it sink. Give it a second thought and a third thought, and perhaps then only post it. You have right to free speech, as I said earlier, but it is not absolute. Defamation laws apply for anything that you share online, and I'm certain all of you are aware, so many political parties, political people have been in serious trouble for some unsubstantiated adverse comments they had to make for individuals or organizations. And this is something you too are potentially liable to. Now, coming to another rather crucial issue, especially in the COVID times, we are at times asked to provide medical advice on social media. Be very cautious in giving medical advice on social media. If you must, do it as a doctor, identifying yourself and not anonymously. Do not be under the misconception that if you are advising someone without naming yourself, you are protected. No, you are not. Your post can definitely be tracked back to you using the IP address, your MAC address, and whatnot. So if you are sharing a medical advice on social media, identify yourself. Perhaps start with a disclaimer. When you are advising somebody on social media, there are a number of constraints, unlike what you would be doing when you are examining a patient face to face and you have gone through all possible sets of information about the patient, and you have considered all of them before advising the patient. You may not be able to do as thorough job while using social media. So make a disclaimer. uh, uh, um, we have a somewhat strong voice in healthcare debates because you would be heard, you would be taken very seriously whenever there's a debate on any healthcare issue. You can use your expertise and experience in providing authoritative information to the public, but then be mindful that this can also go against you. Signposting sources of information or answering general questions of facts is unlikely to be problematic. If there's a general discussion about, say, COVID, when would the COVID end, and you say, in my personal opinion, based on what I have read or what I understand, this is what I feel, this is fine. However, there would be significant risk in providing personalized health advice via social media to members of public, and it should be avoided unless absolutely essential. As I said, always provide a disclaimer and perhaps a conflict of interest. If you are conducting a research or a clinical trial, and or you have a commercial interest in certain kinds of treatment and you are advising that to an individual over social media, you must, as a rule, explain or declare that conflict of interest. The MCI and so many other regulators, including institutions and hospitals, they now provide clear instructions to doctors for not using publicly accessible social media to discuss a patient's health with the patient or with a third person. I think this point was made by the previous speaker, one of the previous speakers, that do not start discussing individual patients' a set of medical condition or medical facts with an anonymous, with anybody who calls you or messages you. The patient's right to privacy is paramount. The person on the other side of the phone line or on other side of the messaging board may be somebody very important, but think very carefully whether that person has the authority or the permission or authorization from the patient herself or himself to know about the patient's condition and the treatment outcomes. There are currently exceptions in play, in such extraordinary conditions such as this current pandemic. The government has now allowed electronic prescriptions to be shared with patients, and these are legal documents with electronic signatures of the prescribing doctor. And such documents or prescriptions are honored by the pharmacies and everybody who's involved and this. But then this is a time bound, limited exception, and not a general exception that would perhaps stay in vogue forever. So finally, I would leave you with this kind of a self-test before you post anything online. I feel if you pass any emotions or thoughts that you are tempted to post online through this 3 by 3 test, first think of the purpose why you want to post it. Is it useful to someone, to yourself, to your organization, to the society, to the country, to mankind? Is it going to be harmful or hurtful to someone? And would you like it to be done to yourself? If you are bullying, I mean, if you are posting a picture of somebody else, which can be seen even remotely, a kind of bullying of that person, would you like similar bullying to be done to yourself? And then once you have decided that yes, indeed, what I am sharing is useful, it may be simply useful in terms of making fun, or sharing of an interesting anecdote, when it is not hurtful or harmful to anybody's interest, and you do not mind a similar thing to be done yourself, then look at it from this other perspective of appropriateness, whether it is legally appropriate, whether what you're sharing is ethically appropriate, and whether what you're sharing is medically appropriate. So often, in casual way, we overlook some of these facts, and which have potential for to come back and bite us in a bad way. So in the currently connected world that we live and practice, there are a whole lot of social media platforms that we can use, and whole various other electronic means we can use to help ourselves, help our patients, help the society to communicate effectively. But the benefits or the virtues of social media that we want to use must be used with a whole set of responsibilities. This balance of maintaining or keeping a track of responsibilities while taking the benefits of social media is absolutely essential for every doctor to remember. Thank you. And if there are any thoughts, any comments or questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Gaurav. It was really important, various aspects which you touched upon. Important ones that we forget about patient confidentiality, and what minor points we really have to look into to be very careful of what we post and how we post. So, are there any questions for Professor Agrawal?
Uh, Good evening,
I think
sir.
everyone has really tired
Good
by
evening,
the end of 2 hours.
Yes, there's a question.
Yes,
Can you please identify yourself? I cannot.
sir. Dr. Jayakumar here.
Yes, Dr. Jayakumar.
Sir, thanks for the presentation. Actually, sir, the previous medical ethics code from most of the countries, or our own Medical Council of India code, says personal advertising of doctors is actually no. And later on, as time evolved, when corporate hospitals came up, they said hospitals can advertise, but then doctors should refrain from doing it. Now, with social media coming up so much, is it a forgotten code of ethics, sir?
I think what you are discussing is really vital thing, a fact which I had to leave out. Uh, these are things which are common to general media, popular media, as they are to social media. There are, as I said earlier, lines getting blurred, both legal as well as ethical, because social media is seen more as a casual platform, not as binding or serious one as the print media or the conventional electronic media, for example, television. But it is definitely not so. It is an equally serious medium. In fact, in majority of instances, the efficacy or the reach of social media today is much wider than a print medium or other electronic media. So what you say is very correct. People have misused and abused the reach of social media. They have breached the codes of conducts, and they have breached the laws as well. Unfortunately, only very rarely, anecdotally, there are lawsuits against such um, misdemeanors, but there are many big hospital chains who are fighting lawsuits because somebody went to the court pointing out that what the hoardings they put up in a city, equally messages they posted on social media, they were in contravention to the law of the land. So I agree with what you said. The lines are getting blurred, but for us as individual professionals, we must be mindful of it, and let's not get into that trap.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more questions? If not, then I would thank all the 4 speakers for really addressing very important issues and relevant in today's time. Thank you all 4 of you, Punita, Aditya, Sanjay, and Gaurav. Thank you so much.
Thank you.